This is Jen Reed with the Science Collaborative, and you've heard my voice a little bit already, and I also talked a whole bunch you missed, so apologies for that. And you also have heard Megan Bratz's voice, and our colleague Nick Soberall is with us as well. And we also have on the call today our NOAA Program Officer Dwight Trueblood, so you're going to hear from a few of us today. The webinar is going to be recorded, and we will be posting that recording as well as all the questions that we take today on our running Q&A document for the RFP. These are both, as you've probably found, on the funding opportunity page on our website. I wanted to mention that everyone should all be unmuted at this point, but it would be great if you could remute unless you are speaking so that we just keep the background noises to a minimum. So there's a couple of ways, and since there's just a relatively small number of us together on the call today, we decided that if you have questions as we're going along, please just say excuse me and you can ask your question as we're speaking, rather than having to hold them till the end, although you're certainly welcome to do so. You're also welcome, if you wanted to sort of preserve your anonymity, to use the question function in the GoToWebinar console to enter your question as it occurs to you. And you can certainly use that function at any point during the webinar as well. And maybe I'll just ask Nick if you can keep an eye on those, and if there's a question that's relevant to the slide that I'm on, you could be the voice of that questioner. That would be great. So let's just talk about briefly what we're going to be talking about today. Moving to our outline slide. So between us, Megan and I are going to cover pretty much this ground. I'm going to walk through the invitation materials that you received. There's an opportunity to ask for any questions of clarification you have about those. And then we're going to basically walk through the process of developing your full proposal, talk a little bit about the timeline, talk about the resources we have available to support that effort, and then some reminders and tips for developing a full proposal. And then we'll talk about the review criteria and the review process, finally wrapping up with an opportunity for any questions that you have related to the guidelines that you've looked at. Again, please feel free to submit your questions as we go through them. Go through these different elements today. So let's talk briefly about the materials that you received in your invitation to full proposal. So we worked really closely with the panel to develop the discussion summary and to also package up the written reviews. So please make good use of that feedback that the panel developed in your pre-proposals. We encouraged them when they were writing the reviews, as well as discussing it as a panel, to offer as much as by way of suggestions as they could to how to improve your work. So hopefully you'll see some ideas and tips there about where to go deeper and what pieces to develop further in your full proposal. Keep in mind that it's the same group who will be reviewing your full proposal, and they will be looking back at and have access to and looking back at the panel summary and the written reviews from the pre-proposal stage. So they're going to be curious to see how you responded to their comments. We also provided instructions for full proposal, including a unique application link that you need to use to access your existing application and upload the PDF of your full proposal. So you're going to need to use the same login credentials that you used to submit your pre-proposal. basically an existing account on our system. And we encourage you to make sure that that's working well before you have to submit your final content, so that if there's any sort of issues with access or whatever, we can work those out well in advance. Don't leave it to the last minute. And then, of course, the invitation included the detailed full proposal guidelines. So we can talk about the timeline that's in the full proposal guidelines. This table here lays out the key dates for the remainder of the competition. Proposals are due at 11:59 on April 6th, so we expect to see them by that date. The manager assessments are due 1 week after the proposal. We'll be sharing more about that in a minute, but it's similar to the process that occurred during the pre-proposal phase. The final review panel meeting is scheduled for June 23rd and 24th. On those days, the panel will be meeting with teams that are invited to interview. They'll be meeting remotely. So the panel will all be together in one location, and the opportunity for the teams to meet with us remotely. During this meeting, we encourage you to have, as your project leads together, and one representative end user. That group will then be able to answer questions that the panel might have for you, including questions about the collaborative process, application of proposed work, and how the end users were engaged in developing the proposal and anticipate being engaged should you be selected in the project. So it's important to reach out to your end user. You can elect to have more than one, but we encourage you just to work with one. But get that person to get those dates on their calendar now, because the written review process is going to inform decisions about who's invited to this next stage. And we'll be following up in early June for scheduling. But you just want to have them held and, you know, find out if someone's planning vacation or something on those couple of that week, then you would want to move to another end user. Everyone should be planning for a project start date of October 1 of 2020. So let's talk about resources that are available to support development of your full proposal. Definitely refer to that full proposal guideline. We spent a lot of time sort of working through all the pieces that are in there, making sure that they're all sort of internally consistent in how they refer to each other, and that they also refer to the templates that are available for your use for developing your timeline, developing your project budget, the data sharing plan, and some other related things. There's also the 2020 reserve management needs that you should be fully familiar with, because you should have referenced them at the pre-proposal stage, but they're still there to be helpful. The Q&A record, which we'll add on to at the full proposal stage, but there's the pre-proposal piece that's there right now on the funding opportunity website. All of these are on the funding opportunity website. And there's also a summary of the proposal review process to help you see sort of how your proposal will be reviewed, the types of people that will be reviewing it, and the kinds of questions that we at the Science Collaborative ask the reviewers to respond to. The pre-proposal tips tool is still pretty relevant. A lot of the pieces that were identified there as to what makes a successful pre-proposal really carry through to what makes a successful proposal. So we encourage you to take a quick boo through that if you haven't. And then there's several other kinds of resources that are available there that are relevant to developing your full proposal. And it's available at that URL that's on the slide there, thesciencecollaborative.org/research. So I mentioned above that we would be asking for the reserve managers to comment on the full proposals when they come in the door. And it's this is really a way to remind you all here that projects supported through the Science Collaborative have to be directly tied to the work of at least one reserve. And you all got to this stage because your pre-proposals fulfilled that. But we continue to encourage you to stay actively engaged with relevant staff from the reserve system in developing your full proposal, knowing that the proposal must be endorsed by the manager of the reserve that you name on your reserve or reserves that you name on your proposal at the full proposal stage. So the manager proposal assessment form, which is sort of excerpt here on this slide, we ask the managers to affirm that each proposal meets a reserve need that they have identified, hence the importance of referring back to that document and connecting your work to that document. That the manager will also affirm that the proposing team engaged staff sufficiently in the development of the proposal, and will also affirm that the proposed budget and role for the reserve is appropriate. These are pretty simple yes/no responses to these three questions, but it's a really important piece of information for the panel to have as we sort of talk through projects, as they talk through projects. And the RFP has the specific questions that will be on the manager assessment form. Let me just pause here and ask if there are any questions from anybody about this, either this piece or anything I've mentioned so far.
Hi, Jen. I have a question. I wrote it in the question panel, but
okay.
I was wondering, so the instructions say that you need to get a letter of support from any team member who is supporting the approach, but not provided support on the grant.
Yes.
Do reserve staff count on those team members, such as like our education coordinator or CTP?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we definitely want to see a letter of support from the reserve to really fully understand how the reserve's being engaged, and that could be incorporated into that letter. And that is separate and different and apart from the manager assessment form.
So do you think the manager could write a compiled letter saying, the reserve as a whole will support, in each of the roles?
Yes, the manager
Okay.
could write that letter.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions typed into the console that you guys have noticed, Nick?
That was it.
Okay. Great, good question. So let's move on to data sharing expectations. So we noted in the pre-proposal that at the full proposal stage, the data sharing requirements that are set out by the federal government and then through NOAA will come into play. So this is federally funded research, and so all of our grant recipients through the Science Collaborative need to comply with federal data sharing requirements. And that means that all the data that are collected or developed through a project must be made visible, accessible, and independently understandable to general users in a timely manner. So that means we're looking for a data sharing plan in your proposal. We've developed a template that we think is pretty clear about sort of what's expected in the data sharing plan, and really encourage you to take a look at that in advance of sort of asking questions about the data sharing plan. But it includes the 5 elements that are listed on this slide that will need to be part of it. So you'll have to, really provide some information about your methods and your protocols for data collection, what your data quality control and quality assurance procedures will be, what your data access plan is, what your data archival plan is, and how you're planning to do metadata. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail around those 5 categories. And I've encouraged you to submit questions now we can talk about in a little bit, or perhaps follow up by email at some later on in the Q&A record. But we're working closely with the NERRS Centralized Data Management Office, the CDMO, to help teams comply with data sharing requirements. And CDMO is available to provide guidance at all stages of the project. And they are also the official project metadata archive. They can also provide data archival and data access service for teams that want to use this service and don't have a logical other data access portal that they would want to use. So for now, submit your data management questions to us and we'll connect you with CDMO if needed, if we can't answer them. But some of the other sort of data access portals that teams have used to archive their data are also listed on this website. So it's runs the gamut of different sort of data portals that are hosting relevant types of data where you might expect to find your data. So I want you all just to keep in mind that it's going to take a little bit of extra effort to get data sets and metadata cleaned up and in the needed format to be made publicly available by the time you wrap up your grant. So we use kind of a rule of thumb for budgeting, assuming it's going to take about 10 to 15% of your overall budget for data management and data sharing, and encourage you to budget accordingly for time as well. It takes not just money, but time to do this right. And again, we can address questions related to data sharing now and or connect you up with our CDMO colleagues to help with that. Are there any questions typed into the panel related to data sharing expectations?
Yeah, Jen, we have one here. And I should note that Dwayne Porter is on the line with us, so he can help field questions as needed too. The question is using CDMO preferred? And does using CDMO need to be budgeted for?
Okay, 2 great questions. I will answer the first one and then I'm gonna turn it over to Dwayne for the second one. So we don't have a preference for your data archival. It just needs to be logical and make sense and have your data in a place where the maximum number of people searching for them can find them. So it may be it's CDMO, but it may be that it's one of these other or yet another depository that's not on this list where there's, similar kinds of data. And then I'm going to ask Wayne to comment on the budgeting piece.
From the perspective of the CDMO, as part of our core responsibilities, we are tasked with providing support for the NERRS Science Collaborative. So for basic data management needs, including both access as well as archival, those services are provided as part of our core requirements these days. If a project does have expectations or requirements that are above and beyond what are considered the basic data management expectations, then we can work with the funded PIs to see if there would need to be a cost associated with it. And we prefer to have those discussions prior to upfront as early as possible with those that are submitting proposals.
Thank you very much, Dwayne.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, we have another question. What is the time frame for the data sharing? Does data need to be shared by the end of the grant timeline?
Oh, that's a very good question too. And I know that we've got policy in place. I just don't know exactly what it is, but I know either you or Dwayne can respond to that.
I can respond if you'd like.
Go for it.
So the interest and expectation is that data will be made available as quickly as possible. In the case of some projects, we can have data that are made available the life of the project. For others, it is shortly after the conclusion of the project. But we also recognize that there are a number of reasons for which data need to be held out of public access for a period of time. And we have been following the federal guideline that at the absolute longest, there could be a 2-year period for which the data are not available. But we have not encountered that in any of our projects.
Oh, I think we lost you there, Dwayne.
I have a question. Can I?
Yes.
So how about code? So part of our project is to develop and improve code. Do you have a special places to share codes, and are there special requirements for sharing of code?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So we have experienced before, and we have had a project where they published their code on GitHub, which is a great resource, and we also can provide access to code also.
Okay, but GitHub is a legitimate outlet.
Yes.
Okay.
These are great questions. Thank you.
We have another one here. Is there a maximum size limit on the data that can be archived at CDMO? And someone would also like Dwayne's email address if we're willing to give it.
Well, yes to the latter, and it is Porter, P-O-R-T-E-R, at S as in South, C as in Carolina, .edu. So Porter at sc.edu. In terms of maximum size or volume of data, we haven't encountered anything we can't handle yet. What may be more challenging down the road if there are projects that are looking to archive or provide access to large volumes of model output. And then we would just have to take a look at a situation like that on a case-by-case exercise.
These are great.
I have another question here. So what is considered data? For example, interviews. What about an evidence library?
So NOAA has their own definition of what constitutes data, but certainly survey responses are considered data in the eyes of NOAA and the federal government. Towards the latter, the former, I guess the latter example of evidence, I have to admit I'm not quite up to speed as to what that might be or look like. So that would warrant a little more discussion, at least to bring me up to speed, so I could provide a more informed answer.
So that's probably a conversation that can continue offline after the the webinar here. But is there anything else, Megan, or should I turn it over to you now?
There was one other question of clarification. Wondering if the data is unusual. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but should the applicant contact Dwayne and see if it would require additional costs to archive. I think an interest in maybe reaching out to Dwayne directly to talk through the data that they're that they would be collecting to see what the costs might be.
That is what we are here for.
That is a good choice. And now you've got Wayne's email address. You can do that. All right. Well, these are great questions, and you're going to have more here in a few minutes as Megan works through a few additional slides.
Thanks, Jen. Okay. So we wanted to just focus here a little bit on some advice and where to focus your energy as you're moving from this pre-proposal to a full proposal. And I just want to start out by saying that your pre-proposals were invited to advance in the competition because the panel really felt that your ideas, both the collaborative and the technical components, were really compelling and sufficiently developed to pursue further. So they're excited about your ideas and they really want to hear more. And so that means that as you're moving towards this full proposal, they really are expecting you to work with your end users and your team members to really go deeper and work to further refine your ideas and get even more specific about things like what it is you're trying to achieve, whose needs it meets and how you're going to work together to accomplish it. And the full proposal guidelines that you were provided with will walk you through, how to present all of this information in your proposal, and it's your job to do that as clearly as possible. But we wanted to offer a few other points for you to keep in mind and think about where to really take the work to the next level and really get more specific about the work that you're doing. So the first one is you can never be too specific about how you're going to meet a need. This is, the underpinning of this work. And the panelists liked what you had to say at the pre-proposal phase, but at this full proposal, you need to get even more specific about what this means. And that's, being clear about how it's going to address a reserve management need, how the research addresses questions of critical importance to your end users, and how they're going to use the products that you're developing. So that looks like something more than just repeating direct quote that a reserve management exists and you're saying that you're going to address it. It's really making taking the next going a bit further and saying it's breaking down the need from the user's perspective and demonstrating a direct response to that need. So panelists want to see how the information that you're developing will be used. So, for example, what sort of management decisions will be easier with, say, your proposed mapping product? If you can, provide a specific example of the decisions you hope to inform. It doesn't need to be complex. Just make it clear, be as specific as you can, and make it sure that it's easy to follow. And then the next bit of advice that we wanted to share is that it's really important as you're describing what you want to do, that you provide the justification for it. Make it clear why the approach, so both the technical and the collaborative elements, are appropriate for what you're proposing. So when it comes to the collaborative methods, our typical reviewers aren't looking for some scholarly citation that justifies a theoretical collaborative framework. It's more about helping them understand why a particular approach, collaborative approach or method is being proposed. And providing that justification is really important for them to be able to confirm that it's appropriate and that it will succeed. So for example, go beyond simply stating that a focus group or a survey will happen. Explain why it's needed, that there's a lack, there's a gap in your understanding about something. And just be clear about how why, how it's how you know what's appropriate for the project and the end users. And the same goes for the technical methods. It's partly your job to make it clear why the proposed methods are appropriate for addressing those research questions you've identified. And just a final thought here, just don't leave any question in your reviewers' minds about whether you worked as a group, including with your end users, to develop a customized strategy that will work well for everybody and will succeed. Any questions about kind of the important things to keep in mind as you're going from the pre to the full proposal stage related to these types of things that I've just outlined here? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next item on our list here, which is the proposal evaluation criteria. This is in the full proposal guidelines that you received, but we thought it wouldn't hurt to just step through these quickly with you to make sure that they're front and center as you're thinking about your full proposal. So here you'll see that there are 4 topics that the evaluation criteria fall under. These are kind of a continuation of what was evaluated in the pre-proposal stage, but we get a bit more specific here. So for each topic, there are 3 to 4 evaluation questions that reviewers will be responding to. They'll have to provide a rating, poor, fair, good, or excellent for each question, and provide comments to explain those ratings. So for example, reviewers will be asked to respond to 4 questions about the project's feasibility, including questions about the team, timeline, budget, and data availability. And you can dig into these evaluation criteria in the full proposal guidelines. All of that language is written in there. I do just want to note here that we do equally weight each of the 14 evaluation questions. And this means that topics with more evaluation questions will have a slightly larger role in the evaluation. And then that brings us to the full proposal review process. So there's 5 major steps listed here for this next phase of the process. The first being, after we get the full proposals in, we'll be sending them out for written technical review. And this is completed by a set of collaboration and subject matter experts who are not sitting on the panel that reviewed the proposal at the pre-proposal phase. After that's completed, we'll return the reviews to you, and you'll have the option to provide a response to those written reviews. It'll be a 1-week window to provide the response, and you'll get up to a page space for providing that response. And then we'll return to that panel that we engaged at the pre-proposal phase. And they'll be consulted. They'll be considering the written technical reviews and any responses you choose to provide to help determine which proposals will be invited to the full panel meeting at the end of June. So we'll use that consultation and take that information from the panel to develop those invitations to the final panel meeting. So those will go out in early June. And then the final panel meeting will happen June 23 and 24, as Jen said. And this will be the final discussion of the proposals with that panel that's been with us since the very beginning of the review process. And this is an opportunity for them to discuss the top proposals and also to have an opportunity to talk with invited teams remotely. So as Jen said, this is where one representative and user and the project team leads need to be available to answer questions from the panel. It's an approximately 20-minute long kind of conversation. You won't be involved in the whole 2-day process. It's a very small slice of that you would be asked to participate in and be able to answer those questions from the panel to get a little bit more clarity about what you're doing. And then, so after the panel hears from each of the teams during that panel meeting, they'll have some time for a bit more discussion and then develop a rank order of proposals as input to the final selection process. So we've worked hard to clearly lay out the review process and the guidelines and in that summary review process document that Jen referenced available on the funding website. But please let us know if you have questions about any of this. So we could pause right here if there are questions about the review process or the evaluation criteria.
Hey Megan, what's the timeline for the written technical review and the response?
It's pretty fast. So we're in the process of identifying reviewers now so that when we receive proposals, we can turn it around in a 2 to 3 week process. And then it's a 1 week window for response from you all.
Great. Actually, one of the things I wanted to know was what month I guess that would be.
So yeah, it would be in early May that we would send the written reviews to teams and give you about a week to respond for that with your responses. So to be more specific, we're aiming for the week of May 4, and then ask for a response the following week.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So hearing no other questions right now, I'll just move on to one more slide before we open up to further questions. Just wanting to point us back to the resources and support available for you as you're developing your full proposals. That website has a great list of resources, and also please don't hesitate to reach out and give us a call, myself or Lynn, or send us all an email at that NERRS info address, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And with that, I think we're ready to open it up for any other questions.
I have a question about the budget, if I can.
Sure.
So how exactly the pre-proposal budget should I stick with? So the university changed the fringe benefit rate, for example. Can I deviate 2-3%, or I have to stick to the exact same numbers?
Yeah, so the guidelines state that you need to stick, you can't go any over at all. So you can't increase your budget. You can certainly request less.
So for example, if university changed the fringe benefit rate, so they'll make me like 1% more. Can I cut out like a week? Can I change the budget item so I ask a little bit less for something else to balance the budget on more or less the same, little bit less than the pre-proposal, or I'm completely wed to the pre-proposal budget?
So we don't have any detail from your pre-proposal budget. We just have your bottom line, what you anticipate your bottom line request would be. And so as long as you don't ask for more than what you wrote you were going to request in your pre-proposal, you have complete flexibility within your budget to adjust whatever you need to do, writing your full proposal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question too. We're in the situation where the PI is not the fiscal agent. I noticed in the guidelines that the interest rate for civil capped at 25,000. So would that still apply to the PI if the fiscal agent is not the PI proposal?
So I'm going to try and restate your question just to make sure I understood it. But what I believe I heard you say is that you're in a situation where your PI is not your fiscal lead, and you're concerned that subcontracts are capped at 25K.
Yeah, that's my question. A lot of the money is going to go to the PI of this project, but the fiscal agent in this case is not the PI, so the PI would be a subcontract. So in that case, they are subject to the 25K direct cap.
So just Yeah, so it's just a clarification on what that cap means. It means that in most indirect cost agreements with the federal government, you can only charge indirect on the first 25K of a subcontract. The subcontract itself could be 75, 100K, but you can only charge indirect on the first 25K. So that's the only limitation on subcontracts. And it really would be according to whatever your fiscal agents or your fiscal leads agreement is with the federal government. But your subcontracts can be any size they need to be in order to make your project work. It's not, that's not what that limitation means. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I was asking a different question, but I got the answer to that different question anyway, so thank you.
Okay, excellent.
I'm just wondering, this is a question about end users and letters of support. And I suppose that I'm trying to dance around a comment we received from the reviews. We're kind of leveraging a pretty complex and numerous engager landscape for our proposal. And we've been engaged in co-production with elements of that for some time. And keeping those folks engaged will be helped by having them named on this proposal. So there's actually like a particular need for that for our relationship building. But we've also gotten a little bit of feedback that that was considered a negative, that we might have too many. And so I just wanted to, I'm sure you all have a pretty diverse review panel, but I guess that was a challenge that we were feeling in our mind and felt at odds with the co-production approach we're taking.
Yeah, so I could see how that could be challenging. I think going back to the points Megan made about being very clear and specific about sort of what you're doing and how it's going to meet your end user needs, and that it's likely that the justification wasn't fully made in the pre-proposal why the large group of folks that are being engaged in this project. So I think it's up to the team to make the case for why and the value of engaging as many folks as you've identified. And if you make it clearly and concisely, I don't think there'll be a problem.
Thanks. I'm going to grab a question from what was entered into the GoToWebinar console. The question is, so the full proposal instructions tell us to list reviewers, but we did that in the pre-proposal stage. So presuming we leave the list we made originally, is it useful to add additional or replacement suggestions beyond the 3 to 4 listed the first time?
Yes, that would be very well received.
Another question here. Are there any items that are not allowable in the budget? For example, can we provide cards to stakeholders that take a day off work to provide feedback in a meeting as part of the project?
So there are some particular guidelines for the budget that you should read clearly, like, for example, around purchasing large pieces of equipment. But the example that you gave is sounds like it was typed into the console, is a great example of the kinds of things that are allowable. You just need to justify it. So you might be providing an honorarium or something like that to a community member because you know they're taking the day off work and you need to compensate them for it. Just clearly indicate, you know, what it is, what it's for, and your justification for the amount. And I guess if you have any further concerns about allowable costs and it's not clear in the budget guidance, that's a really good one to either ask now or to reach back out to us as you're developing your budgets and your budget justifications.
Another question came in. Let me just grab it here. So should travel to the NERRS annual meeting be included in the budget? Is it expected that PIs of funded teams meet at the annual meetings or attend the annual meeting?
That's a great question. So as part of being someone who has a project in the Science Collaborative, you're part of a cohort, and we bring people together for a project workshop, which is mentioned in the full proposal guidelines, and we provide support for two leads to attend that, typically the project lead and then either a technical lead or maybe the collaborative lead. So you do not need to budget for that. You are not required to attend the annual meeting. Attending the annual meeting, however, might advance your project in some way. And if that makes sense, you should include that in your budget. So if it makes sense as part of your own scope of work, then that's the case. But if it doesn't, and you're not going for any other reason, and that's not where the project workshop is, you do not need to attend the NERRS annual meeting. So we're getting close to the top of the hour. And we just want to say thanks for all the great questions, for tuning into this webinar. I encourage you to continue thinking about the questions you might have and make sure you get them to Megan or Lynn, whose contact information is up on the screen. But congratulations on getting to this stage of the process. And we're really looking forward to seeing your full proposals when they come in the door. So best of luck to you over the next month or so. And thank you for attending today. Hope you have a great afternoon and a great week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen and Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, I do see one more question that came in from a participant. If you're still on the line, you could potentially answer it.
I am here.
I think the person who posed the question is still here. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm still here. So I asked, usually we have participant support costs for things like workshops are free of IDC at my institution. But in the budget template, I'm not really seeing a category for that. Is that something that I can include in travel? It's just, it is an institution policy, but I have to classify it as participant support.
Sure, it could go as a separate line under under travel, if that makes sense to you. There's also typically a category called other. And I know that's where I put things like that are indirect free. I put them in there and then they can be justified.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I'll sign off now. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Great question. Thank you.